My name is Valerie. I am 30 years old. Last Tuesday, I sat behind my desk at the hospital and watched my phone screen flash relentlessly. Within a single hour, I received 137 missed calls and voicemails from the family who erased me from their lives. 14 years ago, I was kicked out of my house at 16, with exactly $2 in my pocket and the thin clothes on my back. Back then, they told everyone in our neighborhood that I was mentally ill. They completely fabricated a vicious story that I had threatened our family with a sharp object, using that lie to justify throwing me out into the cold. Now, the exact same people who treated me like a dangerous burden are desperately clawing for my attention. Their sudden desperation sparked the moment they saw my face on the cover of a national medical magazine, which proudly displayed my title as Chief of Neurosurgery. I listened to those voicemails in absolute silence. Out of 137 messages, not a single person said they were sorry. They did not admit their lies or express any guilt. Every single voice simply demanded my resources and begged me to fix their shattered lives. Before I reveal exactly how I confronted the people who once destroyed me, take a second to like and subscribe if you believe that massive success is the ultimate revenge. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from today. Now let me take you back to the night my entire concept of family was permanently erased. My entire concept of family was permanently erased on a late winter night. My grandfather had passed away earlier that year and left a substantial life insurance policy exclusively in my name. Because I was only 16, the funds were held in a trust meant strictly for my future education. My father, Jeffrey, had recently accumulated massive personal debts through a series of failed investments and reckless financial decisions. He viewed my inheritance as his personal financial lifeline to avoid bankruptcy. He desperately needed a legal justification to gain control of those funds. Alternatively, he needed to remove me entirely to claim extreme financial hardship and petition the court for the assets. He could not simply withdraw the money from the bank. Therefore, he devised a highly calculated strategy to discredit my sanity and force me out of the house. My sister Giselle willingly coordinated the physical setup for his plan. I was standing by the sink washing dishes after dinner when she walked into the kitchen holding a heavy water glass. She looked directly at me with an entirely blank expression before intentionally smashing the glass against the hard edge of the granite countertop. Sharp glass shards scattered across the tile floor. She calmly picked up a jagged piece and deliberately dragged it across her own left forearm to create a deep cut. As blood welled up from the wound, her demeanor shifted instantly. Giselle began screaming frantically at the top of her lungs. She yelled that I had suddenly attacked her without provocation. She shouted for our parents, falsely accusing me of grabbing a sharp object and threatening to severely harm her. My father rushed into the kitchen immediately and acted with rehearsed urgency. He did not bother to ask what happened or check the severity of her wound. He aggressively grabbed my arm and twisted it painfully behind my back before dragging me forcefully toward the front entryway. He hauled me outside onto the freezing porch just as several neighbors stepped out onto their lawns to investigate the loud shouting. My father pointed his finger at me and loudly declared to the entire street that I had completely lost psychological control. He announced that I was a severe physical threat to the household. He claimed that he had absolutely no choice but to remove me immediately to protect his eldest daughter. He weaponized this fabricated narrative perfectly to discard me justifiably in front of witnesses. I looked back into the brightly lit hallway while hoping for any form of intervention. My mother, Pamela, stood silently on the second step of the main staircase. She watched the entire physical altercation unfold without uttering a single word of objection. Instead of questioning the obvious lie or protecting her youngest child from being dragged out, she picked up a small duffel bag containing a few of my old sweaters. With absolute indifference, she dropped the bag onto the hardwood floor near the threshold. Her silent complicity demonstrated her total alignment with her husband and eldest daughter's cruel actions. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, and I heard the deadbolt lock slide firmly into place. I stood on the concrete porch while holding exactly $2 in my coat pocket. I picked up the duffel bag and started walking along the edge of the dark highway. The winter wind cut right through my thin clothes, but I absolutely refused to stop moving. I knew that staying outside would guarantee freezing to death before sunrise. I maintained a steady and determined pace for 3 miles, deciding to knock on the door of a local youth shelter instead of collapsing on the street. 4 relentless years following that night became an exhausting sequence of physical endurance just to sustain my life and continue my education. I immediately secured a night shift position at a massive industrial laundry facility located on the outskirts of the city. My primary responsibility involved standing on a concrete floor for 8 hours while sorting heavy loads of soiled hospital linens. I constantly breathed in the sharp scent of industrial bleach and operated heavy machinery from midnight until dawn just to afford basic food. As soon as my overnight shift finally ended, I walked directly to my high school to attend regular classes while fighting severe sleep deprivation. I maintained this punishing schedule without missing a single day because earning my diploma was my only ticket out of poverty. I worked extra weekend shifts at a diner just to ensure I could afford basic school supplies. My physical exhaustion eventually paid off when I received an official acceptance letter for a rigorous pre-med university program. However, the prestigious acceptance brought the immediate crushing reality of exorbitant tuition fees that I obviously could not afford. I sat alone in a crowded financial aid office and carefully signed my name across dozens of pages of student loan documents. I willingly took on a massive mountain of debt because I understood that medical school was my only path to absolute independence. I had absolutely no financial safety net or guarantor to rely on if I failed. I completely understood that any minor mistake in my academic performance would immediately result in homelessness, so failure simply was never an option for me. During my first semester in a notoriously difficult chemistry course, I met my best friend, Nina. We quickly recognized that we were both struggling immensely to afford basic university housing and expensive course materials. We decided to solve our financial problems pragmatically by renting a cramped basement apartment located several miles away from the main campus. Our living arrangement was based entirely on strict financial survival rather than emotional comfort. We divided the monthly rent exactly in half and created a rigid daily schedule to share one single set of expensive medical textbooks. We meticulously coordinated our specific study hours and work shifts so that neither of us would fall behind in our demanding coursework while still working our respective minimum wage jobs. While I pushed my body to its absolute limits and frequently fell asleep, leaning over a table in the campus library, Jeffrey and Giselle were thoroughly enjoying the financial windfall they had stolen from my future. They had successfully managed to liquidate the life insurance trust fund that my grandfather had intended solely for my education. They shamelessly used my inheritance to finance luxury vacations and purchase expensive designer items for themselves. They spent the stolen money recklessly to upgrade their lifestyle while I survived on discounted instant noodles and walked through freezing weather to avoid paying standard public transportation bus fares. To constantly explain my sudden and permanent absence during family holidays, Jeffrey and Giselle constructed a meticulously detailed lie for our extended relatives. They systematically informed every aunt and uncle that my mental condition had deteriorated severely. They claimed that they had been forced to institutionalize me inside a highly secure psychiatric facility for my own safety. They effectively convinced our entire extended family that I was completely unreachable and incapable of maintaining contact. This calculated fabrication brilliantly served 2 distinct purposes for them. It completely prevented any curious relatives from trying to locate me, and it provided a perfect smokescreen to hide their deliberate financial theft. They lived comfortably inside their web of lies while I silently built my future from the ground up. Entering the third year of my surgical residency, the relentless routine inside the hospital began forging my professional character into absolute steel. The high-pressure environment was significantly compounded by the blatant contempt I faced daily from several legacy doctors who came from wealthy medical families. These privileged peers quickly discovered my background of living in a youth shelter and actively weaponized that information against me. They consistently manipulated the department's schedules, intentionally burdening me with the most undesirable overnight shifts and punishing weekend rotations. They assumed that a resident without any powerful family backing would simply break under the physical strain. Instead of complaining, I used their hostility as fuel to refine my clinical focus and outwork every single one of them on the floor. My relentless work ethic eventually caught the attention of my mentor, Dr. Lorna. During a highly complex procedure to resect a deeply embedded brain tumor, she carefully observed my technique from across the operating table. She noted the absolute steadiness of my hands and my precise ability to navigate fragile neurovascular structures under extreme pressure. Recognizing a level of raw surgical talent that could not be taught, she made an unprecedented decision to bypass standard hospital hierarchy. Dr. Lorna broke long-standing department protocols by officially elevating me to the primary surgical team, bypassing several senior residents who possessed prestigious family names but lacked actual technical precision. Her decision gave me the platform I desperately needed. I proved the validity of her controversial decision just weeks later when a massive traffic accident flooded our trauma center with critical patients. The designated attending neurosurgeon was caught in gridlock and could not reach the hospital in time to handle a catastrophic head trauma case. With the patient rapidly deteriorating from severe intracranial pressure, I immediately stepped up and assumed total command of the operating room. I performed a flawless emergency craniotomy, removing the skull flap and evacuating the expanding hematoma with calculated efficiency. I stabilized the patient completely, just as the senior surgeons finally burst through the doors. My decisive action under lethal pressure proved definitively that I possessed the rare clinical judgment required to lead complex surgeries independently. Despite that major victory, the brutal reality of neurosurgery eventually delivered a devastating blow when I lost my very first patient following a severe post-operative complication. The sudden loss completely shattered my professional confidence, leaving me sitting on the hospital corridor floor while questioning my entire medical career. Nina immediately left her own workplace and rushed to the hospital to sit beside me in that sterile hallway for the entire night. She provided the only instance of emotional support I ever truly needed, firmly reminding me of the sheer determination that brought me out of poverty. She grounded my perspective, insisting that the overwhelming pain I felt was exactly what would make me a compassionate and relentless surgeon moving forward. I channeled that profound grief directly into my academic preparation, studying relentlessly for my surgical board certification examinations. When the national results were officially published, I passed the rigorous specialty exams with absolute perfect scores across all clinical categories. My flawless academic performance effectively silenced every remaining critic in the administration and completely obliterated the prejudices held by the legacy doctors. I officially secured my permanent position within the department, transitioning from an underdog resident into a highly respected specialist. I built an untouchable reputation based entirely on undeniable surgical outcomes and raw merit, permanently securing my professional future without owing a single favor to anyone. 14 years after the exact night I was forced out of my house, I officially grasped the absolute power and professional status that my former family could never hope to touch. Following an extensive nationwide search, the board of directors at the Central Medical Institute in Kansas City unanimously appointed me to the highly coveted position of Chief of Neurosurgery. This historic promotion established me as the primary authority over a massive medical department and granted me complete control over millions of dollars in operational budgets. Shortly after my official appointment, a prestigious national medical magazine selected me as their primary cover feature for their annual leadership publication. The extensive editorial specifically highlighted my groundbreaking surgical techniques in complex tumor resections that had significantly improved patient survival rates. Furthermore, the detailed article publicly noted my rapid transition into the top tier of industry income, explicitly detailing the lucrative compensation packages associated with my elite surgical expertise. My face. My extensive medical credentials and the undeniable proof of my immense financial success were prominently displayed on thousands of glossy pages distributed to clinics and hospitals nationwide. That widespread publication eventually bridged the massive geographical distance between my current reality and the toxic people I had deliberately left behind. My Uncle Wayne happened to notice my familiar face on the magazine cover while visiting a local community newsstand in my former hometown. Recognizing his estranged niece immediately, he purchased the heavy issue and brought it directly to a scheduled family gathering later that same afternoon. Without fully anticipating the chaotic reaction his action would inevitably ignite, he casually placed the pristine magazine right in the center of the large dining table at Jeffrey's house. The high-resolution photograph of me wearing my embroidered white coat sat directly in front of the very people who had maliciously attempted to destroy my future. Jeffrey and Giselle immediately grabbed the publication from the table and stared at the glossy cover in absolute disbelief. They read my official medical title out loud while silently processing the undeniable reality of my current social prestige and massive financial resources. They sat there staring at the undeniable success of the exact same child they had once publicly branded as a dangerous, unstable lunatic. They aggressively flipped through the pages to read the entire multi-page interview analyzing every detail about my luxurious lifestyle and institutional authority. Their carefully fabricated narrative about my severe mental deterioration instantly shattered right in front of the extended family members who were gathered in the dining room. The irrefutable proof of my extreme competence proved that their previous stories were nothing but calculated lies used to cover up their own abusive behavior. Instead of feeling any genuine remorse for their past actions, the sudden revelation of my wealth instantly triggered their extreme greed and deep financial panic. Realizing that I now possessed the exact resources they desperately needed to solve their own failures, Jeffrey and Giselle immediately began scrambling to locate my direct contact information. They scoured various hospital directories, corporate leadership portals, and professional medical networking sites until they successfully bypassed the standard hospital switchboard to find my internal office line. The moment they secured my private clinical number, they initiated the relentless bombardment of messages that interrupted my quiet afternoon. They frantically dialed my phone repeatedly without pause, creating the exact chaotic flood of 137 missed calls and voicemails that flashed rapidly across my screen. Their desperate attempts to establish immediate contact were driven entirely by their own selfish necessities, proving that their sudden interest in my life was strictly financial rather than a genuine desire for familial reconciliation. Exactly 3 days after that magazine publication hit the newsstands, the ugly truth hiding beneath their sudden desperate pleas was completely exposed. I sat in the quiet isolation of my hospital office and systematically analyzed the staggering hypocrisy embedded within their recorded messages. Giselle utilized a pathetic crying technique, sobbing dramatically into the receiver while aggressively repeating tired cliches about the unbreakable bond of shared blood. She completely omitted any reference to the deep scars she had intentionally caused in the past. Jeffrey maintained his infuriatingly arrogant demeanor despite his obvious desperation. He used a condescending and authoritative tone, demanding a mandatory face-to-face meeting as if he still possessed parental authority over my schedule. I archived every single audio file as documented evidence, fully recognizing that neither of them offered a single shred of genuine apology for destroying my teenage years. My profound disgust quickly transitioned into complete clarity when Uncle Wayne secretly bypassed his family members and called my direct office line later that evening. Unlike the others, he did not ask me for money or attempt to manipulate my emotions. Instead, he provided a comprehensive verbal dossier detailing the catastrophic financial collapse that had recently consumed their household. He methodically outlined the severe consequences they were currently facing, proving definitively that their sudden interest in my professional success was motivated exclusively by their own urgent legal disasters, rather than any genuine desire for familial reconciliation. Wayne explicitly explained that the independent commercial company Jeffrey had operated for over a decade had filed for complete bankruptcy following years of reckless financial mismanagement. Jeffrey had systematically drained his corporate accounts to maintain a lavish personal lifestyle, exhausting every available credit line in the process. Consequently, his primary mortgage lender had officially frozen all of his remaining liquid assets and was currently finalizing the aggressive legal paperwork to execute a full foreclosure on his primary residence. He was literally mere weeks away from being physically evicted by law enforcement from the very house he had violently thrown me out of many years ago. The situation involving my sister was substantially more severe and carried immediate criminal implications. Giselle was currently the primary target of an active criminal investigation concerning a massive credit card fraud operation. She was facing undeniable felony charges that carried mandatory state prison sentences. She desperately needed a prominent citizen with flawless social prestige, unblemished background records, and massive financial resources to formally act as her legal guarantor during her upcoming bail hearings. She foolishly believed that my newly publicized medical title could serve as the ultimate legal shield to protect her from incarceration. Before abruptly ending our phone conversation, Uncle Wayne delivered a crucial final warning regarding their immediate tactical strategy. He revealed that Jeffrey had intentionally purchased overpriced black market admission tickets from a third-party vendor to infiltrate the upcoming medical anniversary gala in Kansas City. Jeffrey planned to ambush me directly inside the venue, intending to use the heavy presence of esteemed medical professionals and local media to corner me publicly. He calculated that I would quietly surrender to their financial demands and sign the necessary legal documents rather than risk causing a massive public scandal. He severely underestimated my absolute willingness to defend my territory. On that specific Saturday evening, the main banquet hall of the Central Medical Institute in Kansas City transformed into the exact location where their delusional expectations were permanently terminated. Taking advantage of the chaotic influx of arriving guests and wealthy medical donors, Jeffrey, Pamela, and Giselle managed to slip through the primary security checkpoints near the main entrance. They navigated aggressively through the dense crowd of formally dressed attendees, completely ignoring the seating charts and usher protocols. They marched directly toward my designated VIP table located right at the front of the room, executing their ambush just as I was preparing to step away from my seat to approach the main podium for my keynote address. Before I could even stand up fully, Jeffrey lunged forward across the white tablecloth and grabbed my right wrist with a punishing, bruising grip. He intentionally projected his voice across the rapidly quieting room, loudly announcing himself as my proud and loving father in front of the most elite medical professionals and hospital board members in the state. While maintaining his painful hold on my arm, he aggressively shoved a thick stack of legal documents, bail bonds, and financial guarantee forms directly onto my dinner plate. He heavily relied on the immense social pressure of the elegant environment, calculating that the overwhelming presence of my esteemed colleagues and national media reporters would force me to sign the bailout paperwork simply to avoid a catastrophic public embarrassment that could potentially ruin my pristine reputation. Instead of retreating into fearful submission or whispering quietly to maintain polite appearances, I fiercely ripped my arm away from his suffocating grasp with enough force to knock over a crystal water glass. I absolutely refused to let his manipulative intimidation tactics compromise my hard-earned professional territory. Maintaining absolute clinical composure, I raised my hand and immediately signaled the private event security team standing near the exits to converge on our table and lock down the immediate perimeter. I deliberately chose to escalate the confrontation and expose their extortion attempt head-on rather than quietly yielding to his demands just to protect the superficial peace of the evening. Seeing her father's primary intimidation tactic fail spectacularly, Giselle immediately resorted to her signature theatrical manipulation to sway the audience. She collapsed dramatically against an empty chair and began screaming hysterically, clutching her face to simulate uncontrollable sobbing. She wailed loudly to the surrounding medical executives, viciously criticizing me as an ungrateful, heartless monster who possessed massive wealth but maliciously refused to rescue her own desperate family from total financial and legal ruin, despite having the power to save them. She desperately attempted to weaponize the natural empathy of the doctors in the room, working frantically to paint herself as a helpless victim suffering under my supposed cruelty. Completely ignoring her pathetic performance, I confidently walked up the short stairs to the main stage and firmly grasped the central microphone from its stand. I commanded the absolute attention of the shocked hall and clearly articulated the undeniable truth about the fabricated glass cut incident that occurred 14 years ago. I systematically exposed how Giselle had intentionally sliced her own arm and how Jeffrey had weaponized that self-inflicted wound to legally discard me onto the freezing streets. Looking directly into the silent crowd, I officially declared that the 3 intruders standing near my table were merely biological strangers and that I possessed absolutely no recognized family members. I then turned my attention back to the advancing security personnel and explicitly ordered them to physically drag the trespassers out of the building and hand them over to local law enforcement. Exactly 1 month after that chaotic confrontation inside the Kansas City banquet hall, the legal system finalized its relentless work with absolute precision. The federal bankruptcy court officially approved Jeffrey's complete corporate liquidation and personal insolvency filings without granting him any financial leniency. Because I adamantly refused to intervene and cover his massive outstanding debts, his primary banking institution swiftly executed the final foreclosure paperwork on his property. County sheriffs arrived to physically remove him from the premises, permanently confiscating the remaining luxury assets he had originally purchased using my stolen inheritance. Stripped of his wealth and fabricated social standing, he was forced to relocate permanently into a dilapidated, pest-infested motel located on the extreme industrial outskirts of his former hometown. Spending his days dodging angry debt collectors, simultaneously, Giselle faced the devastating consequences of her extensive credit card fraud operation without any prestigious legal shield to protect her. During her highly publicized sentencing hearing, her defense attorney frantically pleaded with my office one final time, begging me to submit a formal character reference letter to secure a significantly reduced sentence. I categorically denied their desperate request and explicitly refused to post any bail money on her behalf. Without my pristine medical reputation to falsely vouch for her integrity, the presiding judge handed down a severe mandate condemning her to serve a mandatory multi-year sentence inside a high-security state correctional facility. Pamela ultimately paid the heavy price for a lifetime spent silently enabling their malicious behavior. With her husband financially ruined and her eldest daughter firmly incarcerated, she suddenly found herself entirely abandoned and completely incapable of maintaining her previous comfortable lifestyle. She ended up living in absolute isolation inside a cramped, subsidized housing unit, relying entirely on federal government food stamps and meager welfare checks just to afford basic daily groceries. Her passive complicity in my abuse resulted directly in a bleak future defined strictly by chronic poverty and profound loneliness. Conversely, I currently spend my quiet evenings enjoying the profound peace I meticulously built inside my own secure apartment in the city. I am constantly surrounded by a genuinely supportive network of brilliant surgical colleagues who deeply respect my professional integrity rather than aggressively exploiting my financial resources. Furthermore, I proudly share my weekly Sunday dinner table with Dr. Lorna, the remarkable mentor who recognized my raw potential and nurtured my talent when I had absolutely nothing. She represents the authentic parental figure I never had, proving that the strongest familial bonds are forged through mutual respect and unwavering support. Looking back across this grueling 14-year journey, I have realized a profoundly expensive truth about human relationships. Sharing a biological bloodline does not automatically create a family. It merely produces genetic relatives by pure coincidence. A true family consists exclusively of the people who stand fiercely to protect you when you are at your absolute most vulnerable, rather than the toxic individuals who violently kick you down into the mud and later demand that you pull them out. You must never feel a single ounce of guilt for establishing impenetrable boundaries and permanently cutting off those who subjected you to psychological abuse. Your massive professional success, coupled with an unapologetically resolute attitude, will always remain your most devastating and powerful counterattack against those who intended to break you. Thank you so much for listening to my journey until the very last minute. Your continued companionship throughout this story carries immense meaning for me. If the exact family members who ruthlessly trampled you suddenly called, begging for favors after 14 years of complete silence, how would you handle their demands? Please share your honest thoughts and personal decisions down in the comment section below.